All right. Hi, everybody. Good afternoon or good morning or good evening, wherever you're joining and tuning in from. Skuk Impichuk. That's good afternoon in my language. I'm Naomi Miguel. I'm from the Tohono Nation, and I'm the Executive Director for the White House Initiative on Advancing Education, Equity, Excellence, and Economic Opportunities for Native Americans and Strengthening Tribal Colleges and Universities. The Secretary of Education likes to joke around that I might have the longest title in the federal government. So be on the lookout for longer titles. If you hear one, let me know. And thanks so much for joining us today. We appreciate you taking some time out of your day to learn more about the White House Fellowship. And I want to make sure that we introduce our panelists and thank them for their time today. So I'll start off with David Iglesias. He could give us a quick wave out to everyone. All right. And we have Kyle Scherer. And we also have Jonathan George joining us as well. All right. Thanks so much for joining us. You'll hear more from them later, so don't worry. And then I'll let you know what we're going to be up to today. We're going to go through a program overview and selection, and then I'll ask some questions from our Native American alumni, and then we'll have a special message from Representative Sharice Davids, and we'll have a question and answer session, and then we'll close out this webinar, and hopefully you'll leave here with a wealth of knowledge and a lot of information about the fellowship program. So for our question and answer session, there's a button found at the bottom of your Zoom webinar screen. Feel free to put your question in there throughout the duration of the webinar, and at the end we'll select a few to answer. So I'm going to kick it on over to Jen to give us an introductory video.
What we're trying to do is to find here in this country, yes, here in the White House fellow, a combination of an idealist with vision and a pragmatist with judgment.
This program goes back for 55 years and stretches across all departments of government and presidencies and administrations. And it's an incredible program, and I hope everyone listening will encourage others to apply, to learn more about this. It's something that everyone should know about, even though they may not be a fellow themselves. It's a rich part of the White House tradition, and we're very grateful to President Johnson and those around him for establishing this program.
Founded in 1964, this prestigious program puts the best and brightest physicians, military officers, academics, business leaders, and others to work in the highest levels of government, with direct access to the White House, cabinet secretaries, and world leaders. Many of its alumni have gone on to greater achievement. Colin Powell, historian Doris Kearns Goodwin, Senator Sam Brownback, Paul Gigot of the Wall Street Journal, to name just a few.
I learned most of all how you champion good causes and how you stand up and fight causes that are not good, how you take risks for doing that which is right. And so for me, it was a very formative experience, one that I've treasured ever since.
Year after year, I've enjoyed working with the White House Fellows. Each and every one brings a variety of talents and energy into the government, and in many ways represents my best hopes for our future.
What kind of person do I think should apply for the program? I think would be someone who is committed to servant leadership, just as John Gardner would have said, someone who is ready to give back.
We expect a lot out of you. We expect you to go back to your units or your businesses or your universities or perhaps government agencies and lead, to set high standards, to set a good example, and to serve something greater than yourself. That's what the Fellows Program is all about.
I had this amazing fellowship year. I worked for the First Lady, Hillary Clinton at the time. I think what was interesting is in the beginning of the fellowship, you're sort of trying to find your way and you do everything. And then all of a sudden, by the midpoint of the year, someone comes up to you one day and says, we have a speech for the First Lady tomorrow. Do you want to write it? It's just these sudden baptisms throughout the year that are wonderful. You feel like you're absolutely not prepared. You can't do it in some ways, and then all of a sudden, you're doing it. And when a year goes by, you can't believe it's over. I think in many ways, the year as a White House Fellow has shaped the rest of my life.
Thanks so much, Jen, for sharing that with us. It's been really great to see all of the alumni and then also now be on Zoom with all of our alumni. So I'm going to introduce Kevin Lavery, the Assistant Director for the President's Commission on White House Fellows, and he's going to go over the program overview and selection.
Thank you so much, Naomi, and thank you for hosting this event tonight and making it possible. Good evening, everyone. On behalf of Director Rose Vela, thank you for your interest in the White House Fellows Program. We're excited to know that many of you are interested in learning more about this amazing opportunity for a year of service. This White House Fellows Program began in 1964 and is the nation's premier program for leadership and public service. The program offers fellows the opportunity to spend a year here in Washington, D.C., working with senior White House staff, cabinet secretaries, and other government officials. The fellowship itself has 4 components: the work placement, where you're stationed at an agency working with your principal; the education program, which consists of roundtable discussions with renowned leaders from both public and private sectors; domestic and international policy trips as available; and class fellowship, including yearly alumni conferences and the wonderful alumni community, some of which are represented here tonight. The fellowship does have minimum eligibility criteria for you to be considered for the program. Applicants must be U.S. citizens and have a bachelor's degree. And current federal employees are not eligible, except for career military personnel and other special government employees. The program is for folks who are early in their careers, especially for those with several years of experience already, who are starting to look at transitioning to a new, higher level of responsibility. We encourage you to read the bios of current and recent White House Fellows to get a sense of the typical levels of experience that the Commission is looking for. And if you have any specific questions about your eligibility or the criteria, please do contact our office, the White House Fellows Program. We're available to assist with logistical questions about the application selection process or the program itself. So you can email us at whitehousefellows, all one word, at who.eop.gov, or you can call us at 202-395-4522, and we'll be happy to assist with any questions you might have. We're also fortunate to be supported in our work by an amazing alumni community, and you can stay connected with the White House Fellows Foundation and Alumni Association by visiting whff.org or following them on their LinkedIn page, where they share some additional resources for navigating the application and selection process. Before we turn it over to the alums, I did want to take an opportunity to speak about the selection process itself. The process is a months-long engagement, starting with the online application, which is taking place now from November through January 5th of this year. It will close at 3 p.m. on January 5th, and it consists of a questionnaire, short essays, a policy proposal, and 3 letters of recommendation. During the first stage of the review of your application, the applications will be read by our alumni community and staff, and then from those, roughly 100 candidates will be selected to participate in regional interviews in March and April of this year, with panels of distinguished local citizens in their communities. In May, then, 30 candidates will be selected as national finalists to come here to Washington, D.C. To interview with the President's Commission on White House Fellowships. Selection weekend this year will be May 30th through June 1st, 2024. And then 11 to 19 fellows ultimately will be selected and notified in mid-June. And then the fellowship year will run from late August to late August. One other thing that we always like to emphasize is that the White House Fellows are selected on a nonpartisan basis. That's been the tradition ever since the creation of the program. The President's Commission on White House Fellows does seek applicants from diverse backgrounds, representing everything in our country, every community, every profession. Since the program's early years, White House Fellows have worked to advance tribal interests within the executive branch, have served afterwards in their communities as Supreme Court advocates, elected members of Congress, and senior political appointees in both Democratic and Republican administrations. We're lucky to have 3 former White House Fellows, all tribal citizens, here with us tonight. And again, I thank you all for your time, and I thank you, our audience, for your interest in the program. And we'll turn things back over to Naomi.
Thank you so much, Kevin, and thanks for all of that information. I'm sure folks will be reaching out to you via the website or email. And as Kevin mentioned, we have 3 very awesome Native American alumni of the program here. And we're going to go through a couple of questions so you can also learn a little bit more about them and their experience. And so we'll start off with Jonathan George. It's good to have you here with us. If you could please give us, where you're from, when you went through the White House Fellowship Program, where you were placed, where did you work, and also your tribal affiliation.
Yeah. Well, thank you very much. Hopefully you can hear me. If you can't hear me clearly, somebody give me some kind of wave so that I'll try to restart. As you said, I'm Jonathan George. I'm an enrolled member of the Comanche Nation, which is primarily located in southwest Oklahoma. I'm going to start off by saying, first of all, the White House Fellows Program is nothing short of phenomenal. And I would encourage anybody that is civic-minded in any regard to look hard at being able to be competitive for the Fellows Program. And just filling out the application by itself, it helps a person realize, are they really making the kind of contributions that our nation, that our tribes deserve? Okay, so I was raised by a single mother, my little brother and I. She divorced her second husband, I think I was 6 years old or so. She had been, and soon she was picked up in a BIA, Bureau of Indian Affairs program that was a secretarial learning school. She was successful at that. Eventually, the BIA asked her to be an employment assistant counselor. We lived from places like San Jose to Arizona, a couple places there, New Mexico, Texas, Oklahoma, Missouri, Illinois. I was born in Indiana, Washington, D.C., Virginia. I think when I retired from the Air Force 8 or 9 years ago, it was my 52nd mailing address. 26 of them were before I joined the Air Force. Coincidentally, 26 of them after I joined the Air Force. The BIA sent me to a welding trades program when I was right out of high school, 18 years old, helped me save the money to go to college. BIA also was a great assistance in going to school. Southern Illinois is where I went to school. So that's kind of a start. That's what lands me where I am now. I was at the Department of Agriculture as a fellow, which was kind of a sleeper. By the time I was selected in 1988, 89, I was 29 years old. I already had a good sense for being able to take a project and help lead a team to a successful conclusion. What I did not have a confidence in was how does the highest levels of our nation take projects and drive them to a successful conclusion for everybody, or at least maximum number of people. And I lucked out, like I said, USDA was a sleeper of an organization. It turned out to be that the secretary had been a long time associate friend of the president, President Reagan. I was there during a transition year between President Reagan and President Bush. And Secretary Ling, a great agriculturalist, had been a friend of President Reagan for 40 years, served as his director of agriculture when he was governor for 8 years. And I just lucked out that I got a front row seat to seeing how at the highest level, people built a team, interacted, and were able to, in my view, they always tried to put the best needs of the nation first. That's not an editorial comment, and not always does that happen, but I had no lack of confidence that they were striving to better our people. I think that was the leading questions that you had. Did you have anything else, or another
Yeah.
comments?
You're leading into one other question I had, which is if you could share a highlight or a work assignment or memory that sticks out in your mind from the program.
I probably had the best year of any of my 14 other classmates. Secretary Ling turned me loose. I worked on projects such as restructuring the farm credit system, the largest bank in the world. He had a great relationship with President Reagan, so there were numerous times he'd say, "Let's go see the president," and off we'd go, and I'd just be sitting in the back of the room while 5 or 6 cabinet officers. Typically, they'd get together late in the day and to listen to the McNeil-Lair News Hour. It was a PBS production back in that time frame, and they'd kind of discuss the issues of the day. Excuse me for coughing. I put together the trips out to the Yellowstone fires in '88. This was actually the first day on the job. Escorted with 4 other cabinet officers, go out to see firsthand what was going on with the fires, what the federal government could do, what would be resolutions short and long term. Led an agricultural trip to China. Numerous trips like that, and discussions. The general agreement on tariff and trade, which was the forerunner of today's international trade. I was a member of that in the Toronto discussions. So really, Secretary Ling, followed by Secretary Clayton Yiter, just said, you jump in on everything that you want to. You've got to use my name. One thing that was a little intimidating, when Secretary Yiter had his confirmation hearing in front of the Senate, they handed him 600 questions. It was on a Friday afternoon, and said, "We'd like for you to have a written response on this, Ambassador Yiter." And he said, "Okay, I'll have them to you on Monday morning." We walked out of the hearing room. He turned to me and said, "Over to you, Captain George." I was a captain in the Air Force at the time. So putting together the team to give a written response to his questions was certainly a highlight and a challenge. Now, if you'll give me a little bit of courtesy, I've got just one quick comment to make. I am a little bit hesitant. You know, our nation has 574 recognized tribes by the Department of Interior. Every one of them has had a different set of challenges and opportunities. Additionally, every member in every tribe, whether they're federally recognized or not, has had their own journey. So there are lots of ways to be contributors. Every one of us has to make our own way through life. There's nothing more rewarding to assist others to become successful. Now, one last quick comment. My grandmother's grandfather had 7 wives, all at the same time, all legitimate in the Comanche tradition at the times. I have a huge family. I cannot overstate the success of the Fellows Program among Native people that I am familiar with heavily depends on respecting our elders. Elders set the tone for what is important in so many cases across so many tribes, nations, that I think one of the things that we have an obligation to do is to reach out to the elders. It was a tribal chairman of the Comanche Nation that first encouraged me to look at the Fellows Program. I had no idea about it. So once again, I can't say enough about the individuality of everybody, regardless of if they're Native Americans or not, but particularly among natives, particularly among such a diverse set of tribes, and the importance that I have found elders to be in setting the course for how we get into the future. I didn't mean to be so long-winded, but awesome program. I'm so thankful that I had a chance to be part of it.
Do you have time for one more question?
Yes, ma'am.
All right. Well, one last question. So you mentioned that you retired from the Air Force as a general. Is that
Brigadier General? Yes,
there,
ma'am.
there you go. And so how did the White House Fellowship program shape your military career?
Yeah, so that's a very good question. Certainly, it put a little bit of a stigma on me. I mean, numerous people thought that I would know everything there was to know about the federal government, so which is not true for anybody. But because of that background, I fairly or unfairly was given a lot more opportunities to voice an opinion, to participate, to kind of help guide. How does anybody get through the enormity of the federal government? Certainly team building was a huge part of it, because my class, 15 people, none of us knew each other. And quickly, in order to have a successful year, I think we all recognize that building a team, don't have an ego, try to focus on what's better for the largest number of people that we can strive to serve. I think that was things that carried over in my military career, which in most people's cases, military drives competitiveness. And sometimes that sense of competitiveness gets in the way, particularly among young professionals. Fellows program did a very good job of rising above that and really orchestrating how do you build a team. Don't worry about the credit. The team wins, everybody wins.
Very wise words. And I like that you really learned that in this program and continued to implement that in the rest of your career. I know you have some time commitment, so thank you so much for giving us your time and your wisdom and your experience, and appreciate you staying on with us a little longer than usual. But just for those in the crowd, Jonathan has some obligations he has to go do, but we really appreciate you joining us tonight. Thank you, Jonathan.
Well, thank you so much, and don't hesitate to share my contact information with anybody.
Got that.
Okay, so long. Good luck.
All right. Thank you. All right, so we're gonna keep the questions going with our alumni. We're gonna go over to Kyle. Kyle, if you could please start us out with letting us know where you're from, when you did the program, where you were placed, and also your tribal affiliation.
Sure. So, just to second what Jonathan had said, thanks Naomi for facilitating this webinar. Really appreciate it. I'm originally from Northeast Ohio and was a White House Fellow in 2016 and 2017. I worked for the Associate Attorney General at the Justice Department and served also in a transition year under Presidents Obama and Trump. As for tribal affiliation, I'm a member of the Munsee-Delaware Nation and descendant of the Chippewa of the Thames First Nation on the other side of the border in Canada.
That's great. I say that's great because Tohono Nation is also a border tribe on U.S.-Mexico, so it's good to have that acknowledgement. Can you share with us what it was like serving in the fellowship program during a transition year, and what you've experienced or what you saw and the difference of transition?
Sure. So, this is a personal view, but in my opinion, I think a transition year is arguably, the best sort of cycle to serve as a White House fellow. I think first, there's an urgency in the first half of the year in sort of getting things over the finish line. For example, in our office at DOJ, there was an effort to finalize a settlement with Deutsche Bank related to the residential mortgage-backed securities issues, and also to enter a consent decree with the city of Baltimore to resolve sort of findings of pattern and practice violations of the First and Fourth Amendment relating to the police department. So, I think that's a really exciting time to be working for the government when you're trying to sort of get all of these things done before the term of office ends. And I think after the transition, you're sort of equally privileged to have a front row seat on how the new administration builds out its team. You get to see, different leadership styles and sometimes very different political cultures. And I think depending on where you're placed, you may be the only holdover in your entire office. And I think this is especially true if you're placed at the White House. I think for me, my portfolio was mostly Indian affairs issues and veterans initiatives. And I think both of these things have historically been, fairly nonpartisan. And I think for that reason, I was able to sort of continue to add value as a trusted professional, even as those personalities changed. And I think just maybe by way of example, I think in that role, I was able to, help provide some historical sort of background and continue to influence discussions related to, active cases that touched on issues of tribal sovereign immunity and reservation boundary disputes, and even ICWA, the Indian Child Welfare Act, which was, began in the Obama administration, was sort of defended in equal force in the Trump administration, and then finally in the Biden administration. And, cases take years to progress, and that historical knowledge is really important, and having Native voices in those spaces is equally important, whether as a White House fellow, a career professional, or a political appointee.
Yeah, I really appreciate you mentioning the bipartisan effort around tribal issues. I think that's something that we really should recognize more, and I think that that's been really helpful. And I'm glad you were able to recognize that in the transition period. So, in your experience, how did this fellowship impact your career after you moved on after that?
Sure. For me, the White House Fellowship was incredibly impactful on my career. And I think maybe I'll just give 2 reasons. I could give 10. I think first, after my fellowship year, I was asked to stay on as the deputy solicitor for Indian Affairs. So I transitioned from the Justice Department to the Department of the Interior, where I led career professionals and a team of lawyers that were sort of the front lines on Indian affairs issues, whether that's sort of affirmative cases, or we're thinking about regulatory revisions, or anything else dealing with Indian country. And certainly if it wasn't for the fellowship, I don't know that I would have been in the conversation for that role. And I think secondly, I'm a partner at a law firm. I'm an attorney who practices Indian law. And so my first job out of law school was to work on the Navajo Nation. So the opportunity to sort of later work at DOJ was fantastic. And again, now that I'm back in the private sector, I think those 2 touch points, sort of first working in Indian country and then later working for the federal government, those 2 things were, and continue to be incredibly valuable as I sort of now counsel tribes, as well as non-Indian state and local governments or corporations that are seeking to do business in Indian country or with tribes. So, can't say enough good things about the program.
That's great, and I'm glad to hear it really helped your career and really pushed you and motivated you to go towards being a partner. Thank you so much for joining us. And also just doing a little plug too, for those of you who are watching, if you have questions, please feel free to use that button at the bottom to ask our remaining alumni some questions. If there's something that maybe you're in the industry with, and you want to know more information about the fellowship, feel free to plug those in. And we're going to go on to David Iglesias. Thanks for joining us tonight. And first question, where are you from? Where were you placed when you did the fellowship program? And also, what's your tribal affiliation?
You bet. So my name is David Iglesias. Well, I was born in Panama and I lived on my dad's reservation for nearly 7 years, San Blas Kuna of Panama and Colombia. Not federally recognized, but a lot of our experiences are very similar to what happened up north. I was raised there and then moved to Oklahoma, where my dad worked at the Chilocco Agricultural Indian School. So I grew up with natives from the north, in addition to my own tribe back in Panama, and then moved to New Mexico, where I lived in Gallup, which is really close to the Navajo Nation and the Zuni Pueblo. So finished up high school at Santa Fe, grew up with lots of indigenous friends and buddies from a lot of different tribes. So I was placed at the U.S. Transportation Department with Secretary Federico Pena, who had been the mayor of Denver, Colorado. And it was a transformative year. I mean, it basically put me on the map. I would not have run for Attorney General in 1998 had I not been a White House Fellow. I would not have been selected as the United States Attorney for New Mexico by President George W. Bush, but for the fellowship. And I wouldn't be speaking to you as a professor at Wheaton College near Chicago, but for the fellowship. It gave me an enormous credential, which I did not have. And it gave me a lot of confidence. I mean, I think I was born with a fair amount of confidence anyway, but this really helped burnish that and give me even more confidence. So I would really encourage whoever's out there, if you're thinking about it, do it. I applied. Well, I could have applied twice, but I looked at the competition in my 20s and I said, no way. I was an active duty Navy JAG officer at the time, and I said, I can't compete. But a few years later, I was ready. And I'm so glad that I was ready, because one of my jobs as United States Attorney was to deal with enforcing federal criminal law in Indian country. So I had 22 different tribal nations in New Mexico. And my job was to enforce 10 serious felony level offenses there. I worked a lot with the governors of the Pueblos, the chairman of the Navajo Nation, and others. And it was just a really amazing experience that could not have been possible but for my White House Fellowship year.
That's great. And I know you've touched upon these a few things. And, you mentioned you served as a U.S. Attorney General for New Mexico during the Bush administration, and now you're the director of Center for Faith, Politics, and Economics at Wheaton College. So how did this fellowship contribute to your career path? I know you mentioned that, it gave you that credential, but are there any other professional skills or personal skills that you were able kind of to find in yourself during this fellowship?
Well, if you become a fellow, you plug into the most amazing network in the world, because you plug in the people who served at the highest levels of the U.S. government, of the private sector, of academia, of the media. I mean, you name it. And the White House Fellow has done that. So I guess for me, it was realizing that I could compete, because I had small dreams until I became a White House Fellow, and then my dreams became much larger. I mean, I would have been content working in a small law firm in Albuquerque or Santa Fe, but that didn't happen. I mean, one person, my boss, the city attorney for Albuquerque, called me into my office back in the 90s and said, hey, you should apply for this. And I'd heard of the program. So I did, and I was thunderstruck that I got selected. But so any of you who, aren't sure you can't compete, look, if you get selected, you're going to compete, and you're going to do great things for the country. You're going to make great friends. I mean, I had 17 fellows in my class. I'm still in almost weekly contact with every one of them. So, you plug into a smaller personal network and a much bigger national and international network.
Awesome. I'm great. You're still in contact with these your fellows. I feel like that's lifelong relationships that you're also building as well. So what advice do you have for prospective Native American applicants? You mentioned someone mentioned the program to you, and I know that before Jonathan mentioned that as well. So if you had a chance to kind of encourage someone maybe watching right now to apply, what would you want them, or what would you say or recommend?
Sweat the details. So spend a lot of time on your application. Make sure there's no errors, no typos, and then have somebody else read it for you. I mean, my mother was an English teacher, so I had my mom read my application. My wife's a tremendous editor. She read the application. And I did something in the order of 50 drafts until I submitted it. So it was as perfect as I could possibly get it. Oh, I had a former White House fellow look at it too. And he goes, "This looks like a second year applicant." And I said, "What do you mean by that?" He goes, "Well, because a lot of people don't make it the first time, but they figure out what they did wrong, and then their second application is much better." I said, and he said, "Yours looks like a second year application." So I took that as a compliment.
That's really great. I appreciate all of that. And also never hurts to edit and go through drafts.
Yeah.
Uh, all right. Well, thanks so much for that. I'm going to pass the virtual mic over to Kyle, who is going to introduce our special message.
Sure. So the White House Fellowship is 59 years old, and we've had just about 10 Native American fellows in the history of the program. So one of the goals of this webinar is to encourage Indigenous folks to apply and ensure that we have enough qualified applicants in the pipeline, so those numbers grow in the future. One of my fellows was Sharice Davids, who's now a member of Congress. She represents Kansas's 3rd District, and she was kind enough to share a brief message, which I think Jen Swanson is going to play.
Hi everyone, this is Sharice Davids, recently elected to the United States House of Representatives from the state of Kansas. I wanted to take just a couple of moments to tell you how amazing my time as a White House Fellow was. I had the opportunity to serve in the Department of Transportation, and as many of you know, you have the opportunity to serve at the highest levels of our federal government, not only to see how decisions are made, but also to participate in policy making and decision making as a White House Fellow. I really encourage you to take a couple of minutes to read through the website, learn more about the program. It's a top-notch leadership program. It's bipartisan. You have the opportunity to meet so many amazing people. Please go check out the website.
Thanks. Short, but I echo all of those sentiments. And I think I'll turn it over to you, Naomi. I think we have time for a couple of questions if there are any.
Yeah, of course. I think it's great to see Representative Davids and see how it shaped her career. I didn't know she served on when she was a fellow at Transportation, but she's now a member of Congress, and she sits on the Transportation Committee in the House of Representatives. So,
Right.
Full circle there. So amazing alumni that we have here, but we need more. So that kicks off our question and answer session. So I'll ask the White House Fellowship folks if you could let us know if there's any questions.
It looks like there's a question about community building. I think the question is sort of some of the community building aspects of the program. I'm happy to sort of take a stab at it and turn it over to David. Certainly in my program, similar to David's, there were 16 of us, and many of us, remain friends to this day. Sharice and I, and others as well. And I think a big part of the White House Fellowship Program is an education component. So, you get together sort of on a forced basis twice a week, usually Tuesdays and Thursdays, and you're meeting with White House staff or cabinet secretaries or other senior government officials in off-the-record conversations and over lunch. And so I think that's one way that the program attempts to build community, as well as policy trips. I think our year we went to New York and LA, and we also traveled to South Africa and Swaziland. So all good community building activities that continue with African Fellowship.
Yeah, thanks, Kyle. I'd have to echo that. I mean, I guess it depends on your definition of community. Are you talking about a really small community? If so, you get that with your fellows. I'm really close to most of my White House Fellow classmates. And there's 3 in particular that I'm literally in daily text message contact with. We exchange ideas. We don't do the jokes because we don't have time for that, but but we do share serious stories, and we want to hear each other's opinions because we respect each other. One's on the West Coast, one's on the East Coast, and one's in Texas, so it kind of covers the entire country. If you define community larger, I think there are those opportunities. But I don't view the program as a large community building program because you're really focusing on the nation. Because our nation has got issues, it's got problems, and especially folks who grew up in Indian country, those problems are incomprehensible to a lot of your non-Indigenous friends and colleagues. But you have to tell them, I had to help pass legislation. I don't know if you can read this or not, but it's some legislation that for a while in New Mexico, there was no enforcement of private property in Indian country. So on a pueblo, somebody could commit a crime and the state wouldn't prosecute, and the tribe couldn't prosecute, and the U.S. government couldn't prosecute. So the fellows helped me, give me the confidence to contact members of Congress, members of the tribe, members of the state, and come up with a fix. We were able to do this in a year, which if you worked on the Hill, that's like lightning speed, that was back in 2006. So, the fellowship gave me the ability, it gave me the confidence to reach out to people at the highest levels and whatever tribal organization, state organization, federal organization, and help make things happen.
They're really great answers. I think we had a couple about just looking at whether we're going to have a recorded session available for everyone. So I think the answer was yes to that. Is there any other pieces of advice you have for applicants, Kyle and David?
Sure. Yeah. So it looks like I also saw a question about maybe when in your career to apply. So I'll answer that and then maybe give just some general advice on applications as I see it. So for us, the average, I think historically, the average age of a White House Fellow is 34. And I think that was about true for our year. I think I was 33. You had somebody who was maybe 41, somebody who was 29, but the average age is around 34. But there's no minimum. I think it's where you are in your career. If you're further along at an earlier age, please don't hesitate to apply. If you're older than that, and exited the military or fairly junior in your current career, you shouldn't hesitate to apply either. On the application, Kevin mentioned there's a policy statement piece. So be thoughtful about what that should be. I think it needs to be specific enough that it can actually be enacted, and something that you're really comfortable taking questions on. I think the President's Commission on White House Fellows, they're have wide range of knowledge, and you're going to expect to be quizzed on whatever policy proposal you push forward. And then maybe the last thing I'll talk about is just the recommendation letters. I think you should find 3 people that can really speak to who you are. I think in my case, I'd previously been in the military, so I had somebody from my direct superior, my direct report in Iraq write one of my letters of recommendation. I had the Attorney General for Navajo Nation, where I sort of first worked, write another letter of recommendation, and I had a current employer, a partner at the law firm that I was at. So be strategic as to who's writing your recommendation, so not everybody's saying the same thing, but you can highlight different aspects of your life. And that's the advice I would have.
Yeah, I'd just like to add to that. Try to stay humble, because a lot of you are going to have great life experiences. You went to great schools, you've done a lot already, and that's what we're looking for. But we're looking for people who are humble, because that's a rare combination to have accomplished people who are humble. Because typically when you're really accomplished, you're not humble, right? Because you think you know it all and you've done it all. So I think the fellowship is really good in weeding out people who are not good teammates. So I would add that as well. And I want to absolutely second what Kyle said about be really careful who picks or who you pick to write your letters of recommendation. I was writing for Native Peoples magazine based out of Phoenix, and I was doing music reviews and album reviews or movie reviews. And I had the editor of the magazine write a letter for me. I had my boss, the city attorney, write a letter. I had my Navy Reserve boss write a letter. So right there, they saw the legal, the creative, tribal, and they were able to figure out who I was. The process is really good at making you answer hard questions that you probably don't think about. Deep probing questions. So, I mean, I've heard stories of people crying during interviews. I'm not much of a crier, so that didn't happen to me. But just be prepared if you get selected for the regional or national finals. It's a really intense experience, and you've got to be ready for it.
Well,
Kyle, did you have something to add?
Yeah, I don't see any other questions, but I would just say, certainly if you make it on in the process as a regional, as a selected for the regional finals or the national finals, please don't hesitate to reach out to me. Particularly at that stage, I'm happy to, spend some time, chatting by phone or email, reviewing materials or otherwise. So.
Appreciate that, Kyle. And let me check the chat one more time. Let's see, I think we covered most of the questions. And then as Kevin mentioned earlier, if you have other questions, please feel free to utilize the website. And as Kyle mentioned, as you go through the process, if you get to a certain point, definitely reach out to the amazing alumni that we have in our community to help bring more. And hopefully you all enjoyed hearing all of this information, and we were able to get to some of your questions. I really encourage you, if this is something that you're very interested in, to really, really think about the process. As David mentioned, go through several versions of that application. Take the time to really reflect on the program and how it's going to benefit you. And I think that this is one program that is definitely going to be a life-changing experience for those of you who are interested in it. And we really appreciate you taking the time on learning more about it today and chatting with us. And also thank you to our alumni for giving all of that wisdom and your service. A lot of the programs that you probably worked on are probably still up and running here in the federal government. So I really appreciate all of that and appreciate all of that wisdom that you gave us today. So thank you so much for joining us. And that concludes our webinar for today. Remember to apply. The deadline is coming up in January and the application is open. So feel free to go fill one out. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks, Naomi. Thanks, Kyle.